10-4 drivers, welcome to the Channel 19 Experience Trucker Podcast. This is where the real stories roll, straight from the blacktop.
Breaker 19 villains, you got your ears on. You're dialed into the Channel 19 Experience. I'm your host, Tony. It's Sunday, September 14th, and this is episode number 29. Welcome to the show. We're going down in the Gulley today. And this week's ride brings back a quote from way back in our early episodes. Anaïs Nin, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And that's the key to this entire driver shortage conversation. Now, last week's music was a little heavy, literally and figuratively. We had Metallica's Bleeding Me, but this week something a little more down home, Brent Cobb's song Down in the Gulley. Now, being on the autism spectrum, I tend to listen to songs on repeat for hours. I've probably heard this one 1,000 times by now. And partly because Brent's accent reminds me of my good friend Norm Thomas. Norm and Brent say words the way I can only dream of saying them. And this song's about moonshiners, people doing what's technically illegal just to survive when legitimate work won't pay. Does that sound familiar? And here's the line that won't leave me alone. Without money, you can't buy nothing, and nothing is a damned old shame. When you're in the hole, you'd sell your soul for running water instead of rain. Now, running water, being that controlled trickle you're allowed by the powers that be, versus rain, what should be naturally available and free. And like when the British wouldn't let Indians collect salt from their own beaches, they made them buy it through official channels at inflated prices. Salt from the ocean that was lying right there on the beach, but touching it was illegal unless you paid the middleman. It's kind of like when drivers beg for solutions like more ELD flexibility or longer hours. They're asking for running water. They're asking for permission to exploit themselves harder, to work 80 hours instead of 70. And we've been doing this to ourselves since paper logs, and as wildcatters before deregulation, cutting the little corners wherever we could, chasing that running water. And since those times, we've been signing lease purchases, which is essentially buying from the company store. We've been becoming independent contractors who skip health insurance and workers' comp to save a buck. For us truckers, it's been subtle. They tell us it's raining, but we know what it is. There's not a cloud in the sky. And here we are at Driver Appreciation Week, which makes me think, are they giving us rain or just another trickle of running water? And don't get me wrong, there's genuine appreciation out there. You deserve it, you earned it, you paid for it in uncountable ways. And like those moonshiners, we've always done what we had to when the system boxed us out. But this time, it can't just be trickles and corners cut. It's not running water we need, it's rain. And brothers and sisters, it's time for rainmaking. So this week, we continue on with our driver shortage series, examining not just the splinter in our minds, but the whole darn log. We'll hit the bulletin board with an update on Chris Barber's case, a warning about AI-generated misinformation, and Gary Buchs on the power of wandering minds. The pre-trip examines Charlie Kirk's murder and what it means when we kill the people trying to have real conversations, and Shane Britt's call to action. We have a problem. Not they, we, all of us. In the money line, we'll revisit Mike Ritzema's brutal math from last week. I'll take you on a little trip to Ireland, where I went to school for a while and where they test what you actually know versus what you pretend to know. And I'll introduce TJ Graff from Star Behaviors, who's trying to solve problems with behavior assessments. Is that rain, or is that just a better designed spigot for the running water? We'll find out when we talk to TJ. Don't forget to hang around for the post-trip. Go ahead and throw that logbook out the window. Let's get this started and sort out how long it takes later. If you're not driving, it's a great time to like, follow, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends.
Paper breaker 19, can I get a radio check? Pretty quiet out here on Channel 19. Well, there's a plain white rapper taking pictures at the state line. Hit the jake brake quick, we ain't paying no fines. The driver swing into the interstate, body shop south at exit 5. Building trucking ain't the same as it was. We're the last of our kind.
At the Mid-America Truck Show, I had the fortune to meet up with Mike Barber, founder of Truckers Wealth. Both of us have a passion for understanding the uniqueness of truckers and sharing our knowledge wherever we can. Mike is a seasoned financial professional. He has over 20 years of dedicated experience serving the trucking industry. Truckers Wealth has created a specialized financial hub where truckers can receive expert advice and tailored solutions to build wealth, minimize taxes, and secure lifetime income for themselves and their families. Check out his website, truckers-wealth.com, and look forward to seeing him on the program here soon. Grab that safety vest. It's time for the pre-trip. All right, villains, quote of the week. And like I said before, I'm going to reuse a quote from a while back. Way back in one of our early episodes, I shared this quote from Anaïs Nin: "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are." And I'm bringing it back this week because it's the key to understanding this entire driver shortage discussion. And thank you, Gary Buchs, for your email this week and reminding me of this. Company drivers see a shortage of good companies to work for. Owner-operators see a shortage of profitable freight. Big and small carriers see a shortage of bodies to fill seats. Brokers see a shortage of reliable capacity. Shippers see a shortage of cheap trucks. The public sees a shortage of competency. And I struggle to see what the heck the government and regulators see. But the bottom line, everyone's looking at the industry through their own lens, seeing their own version of the shortage, their own version of safety, their own definition of trucker. And until we acknowledge that we're all seeing different things, that we're seeing things as we are, not as they are, we're going to struggle to have a real conversation about solutions. You ever drive someplace in your personal vehicle and be like, man, this is way prettier when I'm in my semi and I can see over all these concrete barriers? Well, a similar concept in these discussions. Same road, different windshield. And we've got to relocate ourselves to other perspectives to see how it is, not just how we are. So let's go wander past the bulletin board and see what else is on the plate this week. Quick update on Chris Barber's case. He was in court this week, virtually on Friday, where the Crown wants to seize Big Red, the big red Kenworth with Canada on the hood and a maple leaf, and they want to have it destroyed. I posted Chris's video breaking it down, so check that out on the Facebook page. Bottom line, the Crown's legal gymnastics continue while Chris and his legal team keep playing the game well. Also, it involves the legal team for his son and their business, because it's not just Chris that owns the truck. His son and the business own part of it as well. Nothing definitive yet. Chris does a great job explaining it much more eloquently on his Facebook page, and also the Facebook page, The Right Blend. But the amount of effort that the Crown has invested and the games that they're playing to do something so absurd, a blind man can see how silly it is. I'm just a simple guy, but how is this not abuse of power? The endless willingness of a government to piss away resources, and to what end? Prayers to you, Chris, and thank you for being one of the shields for the rest of us. There's several ways to help support Chris. Start by saying hi on his Facebook page and let him know that you're there, that you're paying attention, that it matters. And also check out his website, cbtruckingltd.ca. On to bulletin board topic number 2, and this one's more like maybe a public service announcement, but there's a ton of fake information out there, and the number of people who don't seem to know that it's fake is alarming. Here are a couple examples. Shortly after Charlie Kirk was killed this week, posts started appearing about Jordan Love, a quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Kirk family. Then it was Sean Payton, coach of the Denver Broncos, J.J. McCarthy, quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, other athletes, All of it fake. Then Neil Diamond supposedly stopped his Hollywood show yesterday or the day before and was crying and mentioned Charlie Kirk during the show. Problem is, Neil Diamond hasn't been performing due to medical issues since 2018. He's got Parkinson's. And what concerns me most about all this were the comments. 9 out of 10 comments were affirmations. I don't like the Packers, but now I'm a Jordan Love fan. Things like that. Every 10th comment pointed out that it was fake or so, but that didn't slow anyone down. People weren't reading comments. They were just seeing headlines in images and then reacting and moving on. But how many people now have these truths in their head that aren't true? And I see this everywhere. AI generating posts, entire pages, fake comments. Some of them claim to be historical facts that are completely made up. Some of them are images of places that don't even exist. Historical places, ruins, pictures of the Parthenon or the Acropolis in Greece that are entirely made up, that don't have the right buildings in the right spots. I don't know who's doing it or what they gain other than clicks. But to what end, I don't know. But in an age where more and more people get their information from social media, this is downright evil. So, a reminder, double check, triple check, cross-verify things. It's a pity that we've sunk to this level, that this incredible tool at our fingertips has been degraded in such a way. But here we are. And if you see something that I post that's wrong, call me out. We have to navigate this information minefield together. And finally, bulletin board number 3, Gary Buchs shared something from Daniel Pink, a New York Times bestselling author this week, on his LinkedIn page. You don't need more hustle to be creative, it said. You need more wandering. And I can't say that part without grooving a little in my chair to some Dion and The Wanderer. And of course, playing a little air saxophone in the process. He listed creative giants who carved out time for free-floating thoughts. Da Vinci stared at paintings for hours. Einstein drifted aimlessly in his boat. Mozart let his mind wander freely. And neuroscience confirms during these moments, your brain isn't idle. It's making new creative connections. You know who else does this? Truckers. Not all the time, right? There's moments requiring intense attention. But then there are those times when your body becomes one with the machine and the road, and your mind is liberated. For me, nothing else compares. Even now, my wife and I take long drives around Arizona, marking off roads on my little atlas, highlighting them in orange, so I know that I've already been there. I also have thinking songs, sometimes classical, sometimes country, rock, new age. I have playlists, or like I mentioned with Brent Cobb, it could be the same song on loop for days. That is not for when you're with other people. Most people don't enjoy that process, but that's okay. My wife loves me and she'll tap me on the shoulder and say, well, it's time to listen to a different song now. And sometimes it's just silence, right? Or the roads hum. I used to love the sound of snowy roads in the wintertime. It had a special kind of silence or quasi-silence. But here's the thing. I'm encouraging you to get out and explore physically too. Take a walk, grab an Uber, Google what's nearby on your next 34-hour restart. Hit a museum, a play, an art gallery, a live band. Hell, just go to a park and clean the truck stop smell from your lungs. Danger Dave goes and looks for mushrooms. Careful with them truck stop mushrooms, Double D. I lament not doing it more when I was on the road. Back then, we didn't have Google, we didn't have Uber. But I'd go hog up a parking lot at a national park, and I always had my golf clubs with me and a fishing pole. I have several fishing licenses from multiple states, usually every year, especially Florida. Just about every body of water has something living in it down there. But there's power in the physical world. We truckers see it more than most. But get out of the cab and go touch it more. I've been blessed to travel 49 out of the 50 states. I've lived in Ireland and Argentina, all over the United States. Visited South America, Europe, Thailand, China. And in 2 weeks, I'm heading back to the UK for a medical procedure. But I'll be wandering while I'm there. I plan to spend a day with Matt Rayner from episode 14, the lorry driver from the UK. We're going to go out and deliver some freight, UK style. Now, Matt I'm not really in lump and freight kind of shape these days, so I'm hoping this isn't a setup. Just kidding. I know the deal. You ride with an outlaw, you die with an outlaw. And CDL in North America still stands for combination driver and lumper, right? So I'm ready. I'm ready to take on whatever we run into. Just don't trust any of my strapping or securement details. Just ask my brother. I'm not to be trusted with anything more complex than a load lock. And the other part about traveling and wandering around is that we tend to believe that the world everywhere is like it is here, or that the view from the ground is the same as the cab. And that's simply not true. Our personal experiences are important, yes, but tiny in compared to all the possible experiences. So get out, wander in this world. It unlocks the world between your ears as well. And thank you, Gary, for sharing it. That's all for the bulletin board. Let's stroll outside and make a quick inspection of a couple of other things. First off, Charlie Kirk was killed this week while on a stage in Utah, the day before September 11th. And I mention that because 9/11, for those of us who remember it, we'll always have those images in our minds forever. And the video of Charlie being killed this past week will be the same way, unfortunately. Charlie was 31 years old with a wife and 2 young children. And I know this touched a lot of you deeply. Some people here and around the world didn't know who he was, and they're wondering why this meant so much to other people. I followed him some, and I watched his discussions, especially ones he did out in the public sphere at colleges. Some of Charlie's positions I agreed with, others I did not. But I appreciated a few things about Charlie. One was his commitment to the Socratic method, asking questions to get people to examine and clarify their own positions. I use this approach too. And it seemed to upset people. They'd start angry, and then the questions that Charlie would ask to clarify their positions seemed to make them angrier. And this points to something alarming, that people are becoming worse at logic, less tolerant of being asked questions, worse at substantiating their beliefs. And here's an example. A couple of years ago, Charlie had commented on, air quotes, some gun deaths being acceptable to protect Second Amendment rights. What he said was, I think it's worth it. It's worth it to have the cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. And people were posting this immediately following the shooting, mostly negatively, as if it was some sort of justice or irony that he died this way. But stop and think about what that reveals. Charlie was making a philosophical point about trade-offs inherent in freedom, that liberty sometimes comes with tragic costs. Whether you agree with his specific position or not, he was trying to have an adult conversation about difficult realities. The people using his death to mock that quote are proving his larger point, that we've lost the ability to engage and discuss complex ideas. They're taking a nuanced position that Charlie made about societal trade-offs and weaponizing it as a gotcha moment over a man's corpse. A man with 2 young kids who will grow up without their father. This isn't about gun rights or gun control. It's about our complete inability to discuss anything that requires holding 2 thoughts simultaneously. Charlie was trying to say that freedom isn't free, but it does require accepting that some people will misuse it. That's true whether we're talking about the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, or the freedom to operate an 80,000-pound truck. And we can debate where to draw lines. We should debate where to draw lines. But if we can't even have that conversation without turning it into blood sport, we're lost. Which leads me to another quote that I saw this week. Shane Britt, a musician that I've mentioned many times on the show, he sings the song The Faint of Heart, which I reference and refer to trucking as not something for the faint of heart. Here was his quote from Friday. They this and they that. They. Absolutely not. We have a giant fucking problem. We have to work on it together. We are the only ones who can fix this disastrous, disgusting circus that we have become. And right now, people on all sides are shouting at one another, making memes, trading snarky quotes. Where are the actual leaders? Who's building a we anymore? There's no political hay to be made in we, evidently. Now, I'm wrapping up the pre-trip here, but I'm going to revisit this in the money line, along with something else that I admired about Charlie. His attempt to build bridges, even with those who disagreed with him. Was he perfect? No, none of us are. But the only way this works is if we come together, cut out the bullshit, break down these stupid approaches, lay down our arsenal of memes. And it's the same in trucking with this driver shortage and our other serious issues. In these upcoming discussions, I'll likely take criticism for not taking harder lines, not going for gotcha moments, or being more combative. I know this, and I'm fine with that criticism. This discussion is too important to do for clicks. It means too much to me, my family, and my commitment as a Christian to being the best person that I can be. We're going into contentious territory. We have to. But I'm not interested in fake arguments or scoring meaningless debate points or winning on a technicality. That isn't winning. Let others do that. Look how far it's gotten us these past few decades. All that gamesmanship. So I'm proceeding with grace in my heart, my mind, and in my questions. We'll give people room to share their perspectives. I'll do my best to ask good questions in the moment and hopefully leave doors open so that we can go back and revisit those questions and topics with those people at a later time. I try to only talk with people who truly care about this industry and its people. And we can disagree with one another, knowing that we have that common ground together, that we're keeping on building towards something better for tomorrow's truckers, and who also understand that we can hold multiple truths simultaneously. It isn't just a zero-sum game. Either I win or you win. Because it's not just simply black or white, ones or zeros. It's something more complicated than that. But that's all for the pre-trip. Get that seat adjusted. Let's push the buttons in. We've got work to do. Trans Carolina Permits is based out of North Carolina. They've been in business since 1977, and they've got a team with a ton of experience in all of our favorite part of trucking, which of course is the government. They provide a portfolio of services for the trucking industry, not to mention they have a compliance program. They'll help you with clearinghouse setup and queries, IFTA and mileage reporting, so your state-by-state mileage, your fuel purchase tracking, and get that wrapped up into a nice little bundle for quarterly filings. They're a one-stop shop for your trucking needs. You can find them on Facebook and LinkedIn, or check out their website, transcarolinapermits.com, or give them a call at 1-800-899-4870.
It's by truckers for truckers. This is the Channel 19 Experience. Let's hit the road.
Welcome back. Let's flip that turn signal on and drop the hammer in the money line this week. Last week, Mike Ritzema from Superior Trucking Payroll Service joined the show and laid out the brutal math. Since 2023, just 2 years, driver wages are down 6% while costs are up 10%. That's a 16% loss in purchasing power. If there was really a shortage, wages would be rain, naturally rising, flooding the market with opportunity. Instead, we're getting less than a trickle while being told to be grateful for it. Mike's numbers prove what Will Cook told me this week. If there was a real shortage, the spot market would show it. It doesn't. It hasn't been. The shortage is manufactured chaos, not economic reality. And these are the questions that make some people angry. If there's a shortage, why aren't wages rising? If your turnover is 90%, why don't you look at how you treat or pay your drivers? If drivers won't stay, maybe the problem isn't the drivers. It exposes the lies that we've all agreed to pretend are true, or the lies we as truckers don't seem to have the power to change the narrative on, and that makes truckers angry. In a market where truckers get mandated ELDs in the name of safety, and then the industry turns around and allows unsafe companies and drivers to flourish, right in the face of a million other regulations that were designed to keep us safe, we follow the rules, we pay for compliance, we invest in safety. Meanwhile, chameleon carriers pop up overnight. Drivers on the road who aren't proficient enough to read critical warning signs, despite ELP rules, are still getting through due to lax enforcement. It's like being forced to buy salt through official channels while watching smugglers sell it on the beach next to you. We're paying for running water while others are stealing from the hydrant. And the anger isn't just about the double standard or triple standard, or however convoluted it's become. It's about being powerless to even discuss it without being labeled racist, protectionist, or anti-competition. We can't even ask the questions without being dismissed. That's the trap that we're in. Follow the rules that only apply to some. In a shortage that only exists on paper, asking for reforms that never address the real problems. And Charlie Kirk's death had me thinking about what real discourse looks like. When I studied in Ireland during my university years, I learned something profound about honest evaluation. See, Irish universities aren't like American colleges. Here in the United States, you get points for attendance, homework, quizzes, a whole list of ways to earn, air quotes, points. Plus, there's extra credit opportunities. In Ireland, it's quite simple. One test in May. It doesn't matter if the course was from October to December, the test is in May. And many of the exams were verbal. You sat before a panel of professors who questioned, debated, probed to find out if you really knew anything about the subject. No notes, no multiple choice, no true false. Just you and your knowledge. Pass or fail. And the American study abroad kids, they lost their minds when they heard about this. I watched them show up continuously, and they wanted no part of it. But I loved it. No homework, no bullshit. Teachers didn't care if you showed up. Either you knew it or you didn't. It didn't matter to them. They were available. You could show up to the lectures, read the books, show up during their office hours. They loved to discuss the topics with you, and they were available all the time. But only if you wanted to. And that's what Charlie was doing. Live, unedited, verbal examination of ideas. No safety net, no editing, just real-time thinking. You know, I have the luxury of editing this podcast. Charlie went on stage and did it live. For some reason, we've stopped talking to each other like that in person. And part of the reason, I think, is because we know how hard meaningful debate is. And we just killed the guy doing what we need the most, when we need it the most. Being able to talk to one another, having people willing to go out and put themselves out there to talk to other people, people with different opinions. And that's a really big problem for us. Did he have regrets? I'm sure he did. Did he wish that he had said some things better, made points clear? Of course. Did he wish that maybe he hadn't let his human side and his human emotions interfere with his faithfulness and his intellectual sides at time? I can bet that he did. And I imagine that's part of why he had a podcast as well, a chance to clarify and do better. You know, Gary Buchs emailed me this week with something that cuts through all the noise. He said in there, if you own trucks and they got empty seats, then you have a driver shortage. But here's where it gets interesting. He points out that shortage means different things to different people. Company drivers see one shortage. Owner-operators see another. Fleets see a third. Everyone's using the same words, but having different conversations. It's like we're all arguing about rain while talking about different types of clouds. Gary's been at this since the early 80s. He wrote about the 10,000-hour reality, that's what it takes to become truly qualified at any job, not just trucking. Not just 3 weeks at a CDL mill, not a few months with a trainer who was never trained to train. 10,000 hours. I talked to Big Cal on Saturday night, and this week, while he was at a Walmart DC, he ended up helping a driver figure out how to line up the tractor so he could hook up his trailer. And then he helped him learn how to move his tandems on said trailer. You know, the driver had been through CDL school and spent a few weeks with a trainer. But here we are in a parking lot with a guy with tens of thousands of hours. And thank you, Cal, for doing it, for being essentially you, because I know that's the type of man and Christian that you are. But here's what struck me, and Gary said it in this email, but it could have very easily have been coming from Big Cal or TJ Graff or Deb Labrie, Mara Elliott, Will Cook, or any of the others who have been on the show. The sun rises every day, and that's the new opportunity we have to anticipate and be looking forward. I do not believe we are going to go back to doing things the way it was 10 or 20 years ago. And he's right. We can't go backwards. The question is, are we moving forward towards rain or just accepting fancier running water? And this absolutely relates to the driver shortage series. When we scratch the surface, we're going to bleed. These wounds in trucking are deep. We can take the blue pill and keep doing this nonsense the way we've been doing it, or we can take the red pill and try to fix real problems. Because here's what I've come to understand. The people controlling the trickle of running water aren't just holding the spigot. They're controlling all the distributor valves. They decide who gets what, when, and how much. They control the narrative, and there's real power in that control, and real profit too. Which brings me to TJ Graff. He's trying to help solve some of these problems with behavior assessments. He genuinely cares about making trucking better, helping carriers find better drivers, helping drivers find better fits. He's not the enemy here. He's working within parts of the system to improve outcomes, and also challenging some of the existing systems where it matters. But the question we need to explore with TJ here, and the questions we're going to ask are behavioral assessments addressing root causes or just managing symptoms? Is this rain or just better designed spigot for the running water? And if we've learned anything, some of those answers can be a matter of perspective. And we also can hold multiple truths at once. And like those underground notes I've been talking about, sometimes you have to go beneath the surface to find the truth. So after a quick stop down on line 4, we'll hear from TJ Graff about behavioral assessments, his company Star Behaviors, his noteworthy career as a truck driver, and we'll see what we find. True TMS is a cloud-based transportation management system. Being in the cloud makes integrations faster, and you're able to access the platform from anywhere. It has intuitive planning, on-demand reporting, and easy order creation, rating, and invoices, which turns tedious admin work into streamlined automated workflows. The folks at True TMS have decades of trucking and liquid experience, and they care about this industry. They don't just sell you a product, they're invested in your success. Visit their website, truetms.com, and of course, tell them Channel 19 sent you.
More than anything, this show's about bringing back the sense of community we used to find on the CB, especially good old Channel 19. No rants, no corporate spin, just long-form storytelling from someone who's been behind the wheel, built the fleet, hit rock bottom, and climbed right back up.
All right, villains. This week on the show, we've got a guest from down south, and you can tell by his beautiful view that that's not downtown Phoenix for sure. TJ Graff joins the show. Welcome, TJ.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that beautiful view, because it's going to distract everybody, including myself, looking at it.
Well, I live in San Carlos, Sonora, Mexico, which is about 8 hours south of Phoenix, 5 hours south of Nogales, Arizona. It's right on the Sea of Cortez. The background that you see there is the view from my patio. And that is the bay of the San Francisco Bay here in San Carlos, right off of the Sea of Cortez.
Very cool.
We're on the mainland. We're on the mainland of Mexico versus the Baja.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks fantastic.
It is.
So thanks for joining the show, TJ. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. You've got, let's start off this way. You've got, quite a bit of experience behind the cab, driving in Afghanistan and Iraq, fleet driver of the year. You've got a ton of trucking background. So why don't you share a little bit about that with the audience, and let's get started that way.
Sure. I've been involved in the trucking industry now for 33 years. I started in 1992 as a truck driver, went to truck driving school, and drove over the road for several carriers. In fact, it's kind of funny, but my first 12 years of truck driving, I worked for a total of 3 companies. And today, in today's world, we have some drivers that in 3 years, they've worked for 12 companies.
Right.
Instead of the opposite. But did that, and then in the early 20s, and the mid 2000s, turned around and worked in Iraq and Afghanistan, 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan as a civilian contractor, as a heavy truck driver, working for KBR. And then came back, drove for a couple more years, and for the last 11 years have been involved in the driver recruiting realm, working as a third-party recruiter, and then having my own agency for a number of years. And now with the launch of Star Behaviors, truly focusing on predictive hiring and assisting companies improving their driver retention and lowering driver turnover.
Yeah. So in all that time behind the wheel, around the world, then back, in the recruiting realm, like what were you seeing that as problem areas that led you to start to think about a different way to solve the problem?
Well, it was kind of interesting, and it was actually 2014 when I was introduced to the concept of predictive hiring. A company contacted me through LinkedIn and saw some of our discussions regarding driver recruiting and retention and so forth. And I didn't have an answer back then. And so they shared with me the concept of predictive hiring, and the light bulb turned on for me and said, this makes sense. And they had a number of behavioral assessments that were job specific. So I took their assessment for truck driver and scored 4 out of 5 stars. In sales and management, I took their assessment and scored 5 out of 5 stars. And then I took their operations manager assessment. Well, if we go back to 2007, my second tour in Iraq, I originally went over as a convoy driver, running supply missions for the military, and then became a convoy commander, leading a team of drivers working with the military and running supply missions. And then KBR said, let's put TJ in operations. He understands computers, he understands logistics, he gets along great with the drivers, gets along great with the military, he'll do great. I was lousy at it. Hated the job, I couldn't stand it. It has actually got so bad that the drivers hated me that they were ready to throw me under a truck or hand me over to the insurgents. And it was not a good situation. So when I took the behavioral assessment for operations manager, I scored a 2 out of 5 stars. And a 3, 4, or 5 is a passing score. So my experience in Iraq mirrored my assessment score, and my assessment score mirrored my experience in Iraq. And the light bulb turned on and said, no wonder I wasn't successful in operations. I'm not well suited to be in operations. I'm well suited to be in sales, in leadership, and as a driver. Those are my fortes and what I bring to the table, but I'm not really well suited to be in operations position. And
so you could make a good sales pitch of why you could be in operations, but the job wouldn't match you.
It wouldn't match me. No, not absolutely not. It was, and there was no job satisfaction in doing the job.
Mm-hmm.
So when the light bulb turned on, and it was like, wow, this all makes sense. And the biggest thing that we have, and the biggest problem we have today in any position, is job satisfaction. If you're not happy doing the job, you're not going to stick around and do it. And so everything started to fall into place. And in fact, I used that company, their services, for a number of years with my third-party recruiting agency. And then unfortunately, they raised my price by 12x, made it impossible for me to operate and stay profitable. So what does any good entrepreneur do? You go out and
build your own mousetrap.
Exactly. We built a better mousetrap, made it much more conducive for drivers, much more driver friendly, put a number of safeguards, extra safeguards into it that gives greater validity to the assessment score, and thus launched Star Behaviors with the Star Logic platform.
Awesome. So you started Star Behaviors and you built your own mousetrap. Tell us a little bit about the assessment and what it brings to the table.
Sure. The best part about our assessments is that they are job specific. So we first started out with truck drivers. And very basically, what we did was we did a very in-depth analysis of what it takes to be a driver. And obviously, my experience was very helpful in doing that. But we also went to other truck drivers. And then we interviewed 27 other top performing drivers throughout the country and asked them, what are the qualities, the core values and behaviors that make them a top performing driver? And these drivers were provided by world-class carriers in their view of what was their top performers. And the drivers came back with about 200 different qualities, and we narrowed it down to the top 80. And very basically created the algorithms, created the assessments, and launched that first assessment back in August of 2022. And we beta tested it for over a year to make sure that it had validity. We've gone through a validation process regarding with industry experts to make sure that our statements and the qualities that we're identifying are actual qualities that make sense within the industry. And as I said, we have now 3 years of data in regards to drivers and taking the assessment and their success within the industry.
Sure.
And so what we simply then did was we've expanded it to now not only include truck drivers, but also include dock workers and forklift operators, very important for the LTL segment within trucking. Also diesel mechanics, all within transportation. Extremely important. The industry is claiming to have a diesel mechanic and diesel tech shortage. Sounds familiar.
There's a lot of shortages in this.
Yeah, a lot of shortages. And then we also have behavioral assessments for operations manager. Okay. And believe it or not, we have developed one because of my background and expertise in driver recruiting. We've also now developed a behavioral assessment actually for driver recruiters also, so that directors of driver recruiting can make sure that they're hiring individuals that are well suited to be a driver recruiter. It's just because you've been a driver or just because you've been in safety for a number of years or you get along great with drivers in payroll doesn't mean that you'll be successful as a driver recruiter, just as I was not successful in operations, even though I had been in the industry for 20 some years.
Right. So let's talk about the assessment a little bit, because I think it's important. You know, I took the assessment. It was incredibly interesting, different. It was not a question of, you know, it was not a series of questions like, do I like 12-hour-old roller dogs at 2 a.m, or, you know, the smell of diesel fumes in my clothes, you know, those sorts of questions. Tell us a little bit about the assessment and how it works.
Correct. And what we explain to drivers as a recruiter and getting them, introducing them to the concept of completing this assessment as their first step in the application process is to explain to them that this is not a psychological test. It's not a personality profile. It's not a skills test. It's a behavioral assessment, and it's designed specifically for drivers. So very basically, we're able to identify those qualities, core values, and behaviors that are integral and inherent to being a top performer. I kind of use the analogy of, you know, we can teach a driver how to do a proper pre-trip and post-trip inspection, but we can't teach them the importance of it. They either get it or they don't. You know, we can remind them to be well-groomed, but we can't teach them not to show up with a mustard stained t-shirt. Yeah. So it's the same kind of thing. Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's a challenge. It's a challenge to get to an understanding about someone in those ways, right? It's not just you know, would you wear a clean shirt to work? Check yes or no, right?
Correct. And the variances between the questions are very, very close. So between being able to identify behaviors versus someone that focuses on skills, it's very, very fine. We've made it difficult. We didn't want to make it easy. So that in order to score a 5-star, those drivers are really your Tom Brady's and Andrew Luck's, the top performers, the Patrick Mahomes type, the folks that they live, breathe, and if, they bleed diesel. And not only that, but there's that old saying of, anybody can be a father, but it takes someone special to be a dad. Anyone can have a CDL, but it takes someone special to be a top performing professional truck driver.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's really hard to, I've taken a lot of assessments over the years. Uh, Various circumstances in my life has led the government to have an interest in my psychological profile at times. So I've had to take a few assessments, and this was like nothing else to me, honestly. And I've taken a lot too in the workplace, right? I'm a firm believer in, I've always had my teams, especially in the office settings, take various assessments. One of my favorites is called Team Belbin, which
Sure.
is kind of a, an inventory of work styles, because when you have teams work together and we're all different as human beings, there's certain types of people. And if you have a team made of all of one skill set and missing a bunch of the other core skill sets, the team doesn't function very well. To your football analogy, we can't have, while it'd be really cool to have 9, Tyreek Hills that are the fastest guys in the NFL, we'd probably have a trouble protecting the quarterback with Tyreek Hills.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so it was just interesting, the questions and your point about it being challenging, right? Questions, it was, right? And there's a certain part, like just human nature is like, okay, there has to be a right answer. And what logic am I going to use to get the right answer? And then you look at the question and the answers and go, I have no idea even to decipher which direction right is, So it's a very interesting process to go through.
Sure. And one of the things that we've now done, in fact, it will launch on the 15th, is we have now created a Star Advisor program in which anyone, whether it be a truck driver, anyone that's interested in taking any of our assessments, can go directly to the website and they can actually click on and complete the assessment. Not only will they complete the assessment and know what their score is, but they'll also then have a certificate available to be able to download and print out to be able to share with an employer or to post on their LinkedIn or Facebook page or Instagram profile or whatever, in regards to that they are well suited to be for that position and that they have those qualities, core values, and behaviors specifically for their position. It's even really great in regards to the ability for career counseling. So that someone that may be interested in, has been a driver and is interested in getting into driver recruiting, well, before I take that leap, I certainly would want to know if I have a strong possibility of being successful in doing that. And especially with people entering the trucking industry as a truck driver, before they spend those dollars and so forth, I want to make sure that those dollars are going to be well spent. So we now will have that starting on the 15th, where the entire anyone will be able to complete that assessment and know exactly how they scored.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I think it's really an advancement overall for the industry of, being able to understand that about yourself, right? And have something to either validate it or make you ask yourself some questions. I mean, I think anybody who pays attention to trucking on social media, whether that's Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, like it's littered with posts every single day of, hey, I'm 2 weeks into truck driver school, or 2 weeks out with my trainer, or I'm 2 months into this job, and either I hate it, I suck at it, all kinds of just the conflict of, did you know what you were getting into? Did you really understand what the job's about? Are you really well suited to the job? Because most of the things they're complaining about, the rest of us who've done the job at some point in our lives go, that's just part of the
That's the
deal.
job.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
You do realize where we're going with this, right?
tell us.
Driver shortage.
Of course, all roads lead to driver shortage.
Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure that we were on the right path here. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that, and I plan to get into that a little bit later with you, but like I don't think either one of us would look at this solution and go, well, once we know this, we'll never run out of truck drivers because we'll know who to go spot at the shopping mall, hand them the assessment, and go, awesome, let me take you back over here to our training facility. You're perfectly suited. It's an advancement, but the challenges of air quotes driver shortage are bigger than just one criteria, right?
Correct. Absolutely. No doubt about it.
So let's talk about results. What have we seen? What's the track record been with the assessment and the folks who are implementing it?
Very quickly, while we were utilizing it for my other company, TTJ Recruiting, my third-party recruiting division, which I've shut down for now. But while we were utilizing it, the response back from our clients at TTJ Recruiting was, wow, these drivers are head and shoulders above anybody we've had before. These are really, really good drivers. So the response there was very positive. And as a third-party recruiting agency, we were simply supplementing their recruiting processes. So they were still getting unknown drivers. They may have been qualified drivers. They may have been quality qualified drivers, but they had no way of knowing the quality of that candidate prior to coming on board, where we were able to provide quality qualified candidates. And that's one of the biggest pushes that driver recruiters talk about is they say, I may have qualified people, but, they turn around and they ghost me. They check all the boxes, but we get them scheduled for orientation and they don't show up. Or they do show up and they don't pass the drug screen. Okay. So there's a difference between qualified and quality qualified. And that's
for sure.
Predictive hiring and behavioral assessments and the Star Behaviors platform does. So that's number one. Secondly, July of 2024, we had the opportunity to work with a mid-size LTL carrier, Sutton Transport, based out of Wisconsin. And they had a driver fleet of approximately 460 trucks, 460 drivers. And some of their drivers were P&D and the other half were line haul drivers. And they were experiencing driver turnover rate of approximately 46.2%. In the LTL world, that's lousy. LTL normal driver turnover is about 22 to 25%. So they were almost double or more than double what the norm would be. And they realized that they had, dollars going out the back door faster than they were coming in the front door. They were spending money like crazy. And they'd have issues with drivers that were topping trailers and so forth. Even though the drivers were meeting the minimum hiring criteria, they just weren't performing well. So we had the opportunity to come work with them. And in fact, I became their driver recruiter. And we utilized the Star Behavior, Star Logic platform again. And in a 5-month period, we lowered their driver turnover on a projected basis down to 13% in a 5-month basis. And that would have been projected over a 12-month period. Projections wise, that would have saved Sutton Transport in excess of $1.1 million for that fiscal year. The end of December, they were turned around, they were purchased by Pitt Ohio Group. And unfortunately, Pitt Ohio Group decided not to continue the project, that they were going to fold Sutton into Dorn Transfer. So they discontinued the project and discontinued my contract with them. So I bounced around for a little bit and found some other good clients, and then found a small carrier out of Minnesota, BM Transport. And BM Transport is about 50 trucks. We currently have all those trucks filled. But back in May, on May 5th, they had 13 empty trucks.
That's a tough pill to swallow with 50 trucks.
That's almost 25% of their fleet. Wow. So Clint Larby, who's the president of the company, approached me and said, hey, I need help. What can we do? And so we said, okay. And in 12 weeks, we filled all of those 13 positions. All of those drivers are still with the company. In fact, we had 2 people leave. We have 1 empty truck right now that we need to fill. And I have several drivers that I'm interviewing for them. And the beauty of this is that all the drivers that we've hired since May 5th all of them are still with the company. So 100% retention. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, when you're that size, an empty truck, when you look at the cost of a truck these days and the insurance and everything else of just the cost of a parked truck,
sure.
it's really hard to overcome parked trucks, that cost, and be profitable with the rest of your moving trucks to cover that cost. And when you're talking about, multiple trucks sitting, man, it just, and you got to stare at them every time you pull in the driveway to that office, man. There's no hiding them. They're 13 feet tall and they're sitting right there in a row. Like there's no dodging what the problem's staring you in the face that morning.
And that's what every director of recruiting through the entire trucking industry fears, is that phone call, that text message, that email from the CEO saying, how come we have X number of empty trucks sitting on the fence? So unfortunately, what the industry has developed is for directors of recruiting and recruiters is fill the trucks. Do whatever we have to do to fill the trucks so I don't get that email.
Yep.
So I don't get that phone call. So I don't get that text message. But unfortunately, we've sped up the process so much that we're simply just filling trucks and not worrying about driver retention, which then affects profitability.
And it's not just that, right? So I spent some time after I had owned my own trucking company and went bankrupt. I ended up back up in a mega carrier, right? My first excursion, grew up in a small town, owner operator, small fleet owner. Then I'm at mega carrier, 2,000 trucks, and wow, universe changed, right? All the logic really kind of blows up and goes a different direction in trucking at that scale, right? Because your problems are now, instead of me looking at one of my 20 trucks going, geez, I got to fill that. That we're staring at 200 like and you try to think of things that are scalable. And you saw that play out, right? Which is, okay, let's build a driver school. Let's start training our own drivers. Let's go, where's unemployment high? Let's go grab anybody who's unemployed in Michigan, because in the early 2000s, Michigan was getting crushed because of all the automobile manufacturing. But
Sure.
to your point, like we were not screening, right? We were like, do you want to be a truck driver? And here's our sales pitch. By the way, $2,000 sign-on bonus, which was a lot back then, and all the gambits of, the driver recruiting business. And, bringing them in, right? Because I'm desperate. I don't have a job. My benefits are running out from my, severance package with General Motors or whoever. Sure, I'll give it a shot. By the way, maybe that little promise that we told you about being home every weekend might not have been entirely true. And, how much you were going to make, back then, 50,000 was a really big number. You might not see, I mean, that's our top 10% of drivers. So you may never see that. We don't even know if you can, you got to get through the driver training school first. So, kind of all the games that you're, circumventing or redirecting down a more logical path with Star Logic, that's what I witnessed firsthand. I'm like, wow, this is like a totally different game. And I was in operations.
Sure.
So every one of those drivers who made it, who, you know, only made it 2 weeks through CDL school before they threw in the towel, I'm dealing with getting them a bus ride home. All the drivers who made it through the school and got their CDL, but made it 2 months and were in Wichita, Kansas, and said the hell with it because they hadn't been home in 15 days. I was dealing with those operational problems, right? I mean, it's not just the cost of recruiting, it's the carnage that goes on behind the scenes of the people who are not well suited to the job.
You are 100% spot on. Yeah. I mean, I like to think that here's the true overview of it. All points of profitability point back to the initial point of hire. If we make the right hire, guess what? Everything else falls right into place. And is Star Behaviors and the Star Logic platform the magic, the silver bullet? No, it's the first step in the recruiting and hiring process. So it's the screening for qualities first, and then you find the best qualified from there. And so simply because I scored a 4 or 5 star on the assessment doesn't mean that I'm going to meet your hiring criteria. But what it actually does is it actually expands the driver pool for folks that you may not have even considered. What if a new driver starting out started with one of the mega carriers and got through their contract because he had gone through their truck driving school and left them, so was there for 9 months, went to another mega carrier, realized that mega carriers weren't the people that really they wanted to work for, turned around and went 180 degrees and went to work for an owner operator that had a second or third truck, but didn't maintain that truck well, or didn't pay the driver properly, or paid them on a 1099 when they're really a company driver, and said, forget that. And now in the matter of a year and a half, he already has 4 positions. There's many carriers that will rule that driver out, thinking it's a job hopper, when in reality, he has all those qualities that we're looking for. So it actually expands the pool for people that traditionally we may not have even considered.
Well, it's a very good point, because I mean, it's a funny business in that way, right? Like, we try to have these tangible measurables, right? So we can compare apples to apples. Like, okay, our criteria is going to be no more than 3 jobs in the last 2 years or something like that, right? And then to your point, like, but we all know, everybody who's been in this business for a while knows, like, there are perfectly acceptable reasons why you're not a good match for, a driver to a carrier, or a carrier to a driver, right? Like, it's not just some universal widget of, oh, all truck driving jobs are the same. We all know that there's plenty of carriers who don't fulfill their promises. The idea that we would hold it against anybody without knowing the details that they left a company is kind of ludicrous, right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
But we do.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy part. And when you talk to recruiters, they're desperately saying, how can we find those quality people? And it's like, it's real simple. But unfortunately, because this is the way we've always done it, the industry itself is stuck in that status quo mentality. And so trying something different, thinking outside the box, the commonality between Sutton Transport and BM Transport came from leadership. And that was a very simple concept of being humble. And the CEO and the CEO of Sutton Transport, Cliff Sutton, and the president of BM Transport, Clint Larby, they both said to me, we don't have all the answers. We're missing something. Can you help us? So once leadership humbles themselves to say, hey, we may not have all the answers, and that then filters back down in the larger carriers to the director of recruiting and so forth, then all of a sudden the opportunities and the possibilities open wide up, and people start looking and saying, this might make sense. Yeah. But the key to it is humbling oneself and saying, you know what, I may not have all the answers, and just being curious to find out exactly what predictive hiring, what star behaviors, and what our Star Logic platform is. Yeah,
it's probably one of my, throughout this driver shortage, make sure I don't forget the air quotes. That line you use there, to me, is one of the biggest blockers to resolution, which is the way we've always done things. And we keep building better widgets, new regulations that are all fundamentally structured around crap that we've been, that have been part of our industry for nearly 100 years in some cases. When you look at things like just our exemption from overtime and other things like that, we're going back to regulations from 1938. Like, this is nonsense. But I mean, we've got a whole bunch of that stuff.
Sure.
layered on top of it. Like, hey, man, this is how we did it in the 80s. So we just do it faster or put a computer process and make it a digital form instead of a paper form. We've solved the problem, right?
Better yet, let's put AI as the first step and screen out people that are well suited, that are well qualified, but because they didn't complete a proper resume according to AI, oh my gosh, they're automatically discarded.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
And I would encourage everybody in the trucking business, everybody listening to this podcast, even if you're not looking for a job, go apply for a job right now that you think you're well qualified for. And I will bet you will probably run into getting turned down for that job because some AI program bounces you an email and says, thanks for applying, but you're not a good match. And you're like, literally, I mean, I applied for a job that one of my good friends was the hiring manager for the job.
Mhm.
We had already discussed, and it was a formality of me putting through the resume. I'd already been partway through the interview process. And I put my resume in, and I immediately got an email back said, I'm not qualified. You've been declined for this position. I'm like, the hiring manager wants me for the job. My resume is exactly what you need, but your filtering process tossed me. And that goes on all over the place. If you go into, you go into Reddit and look for like job searching, advice and things like that, like this is rampant. Like these computer programs and their algorithms are utter nonsense.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, let me ask you a couple questions before we move on to the next topic. So last week, I talked with Mike Ritzema over at Superior Trucking Payroll Service, and we were talking about just kind of the payroll side of the driver shortage. But one thing he mentioned was he's got a client, and he's got a bunch of clients. But so I was asking him on the spectrum of like who's being successful from a retention and a bringing in the right kind of drivers, and he was talking about, one of his carriers has around a 10% turnover or churn. And so we talked a little bit about that, and old school trucker guy, right, with a company, and he's very particular about who he hires, right? And so I wanted to get your feedback on that. Like, let's say we're going all the way over to the analog side of the spectrum, which is kind of gut feel, not a lot of algorithms or assessments, and the guy's going off of that. And so I wanted to get your take on that. Like, what's the difference between a guy and even like Clint, going, I mean, obviously I think Clint, I don't know Clint, but most people in trucking don't get to 50 trucks without having some background in trucking. So, I'm sure there was probably some letting go of, maybe I don't know everything with Clint, to your point about him being humble and going, look, it's time to try something different. But for the people who are, like Mike's client, what are your thoughts on somebody who's kind of doing it old school wizardry style, and just the sage veteran doesn't need a fancy assessment?
I'm not arrogant enough to realize that, you know what, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's working well, God bless you. But for those organizations that are struggling, for those organizations that are saying, wow, we're doing everything that the pundits have taught us to do. There's large lead gen organizations and job boards and so forth. And, they all talk about speed to hire, speed to hire, speed to hire. You need to get there first. And I'm a huge NFL fan. And over the last week and a half, we have seen some remarkable performances, incredible performances with Josh Allen, with JJ McCarthy. We've seen it before with Patrick Mahomes. We've seen it in the past with Tom Brady, with Joe Montana. The great ones know how to slow it down when everything's on the line. They slow the clock down. And that's really what Star Behaviors and the Star Logic platform do, is it allows you to slow the process down to find the right candidate, and then have those processes in place through your ATM, pulling the proper reports, MVRs, background checks, PSP reports, clearinghouse, and so forth. so that you are at lightning speed in processing the application, but you've slowed it down to find the right individual, and then you execute precision-like. And rather than just being active and being busy, you know, like a mouse on a turn wheel, okay, we're actually doing things that make sense rather than just staying productive, rather than just staying busy, so that our increase in productivity skyrockets. And what happens when you do that is just in application processing costs decrease dramatically. If you address driver turnover and improve driver retention, you don't have to have as much spend in advertising. So that everything just falls right into place. And the key to this is to slow it down to execute precision-like.
So you made me think of something there. And you might have heard this too, because I think maybe it originates in the military, this saying, but it goes, let me make sure I get it right. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, it makes sense, you know. So no, we're not that arrogant to believe that we have all the answers. If there's an organization that is doing it and they have been successful and gut feeling, the problem is that gut feeling is not scalable.
Right.
Right. So yeah, it's great for one organization, maybe wonderful, but you can't scale it. So you can't have a dramatic effect on the industry or on a number of select companies, because I will tell you, Star Behaviors is not for every carrier. And we're not, and every carrier is not good for Star Behaviors. So we're very selective also in the companies that are able to utilize the platform. We're open to listening, you know, and checking and making sure that these companies truly are interested in solving their driver retention, solving the driver turnover issues, increasing profits, and benefiting it for all employees, including the drivers. Because once a company becomes more profitable, guess what? Now they don't have to worry about sign-on bonuses. Now they don't have to worry about offering college educations like some carriers have previously done in the past. But guess what? If they so desire, they can now provide that for all employees as a benefit versus just an enticement to come drive for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the realities, right, of trucking, right? Like, you can screen for the right drivers, the right suitability, the right aptitudes and mindsets, but if the pay sucks or the conditions suck or the trucks aren't well maintained or all these other things like that, you know, this isn't a, you know, a magic potion here to solve it, right? It's a layer in a series of things that make a trucking company successful, not just a standalone, hey, if you just pick the right drivers, they'll endure anything.
You know, and we've also seen over the recent past, the last several months, you know, organizations coming out and trying to share with, you know, what are drivers looking for? Just like everyone else, drivers want to be treated with dignity and respect. That's a no-brainer. But for some of the pundits in the industry, that is like the second coming of Christ. It's, oh my gosh, drivers need to be treated well. Well, yeah, everyone needs to be treated well. So that's a no-brainer. That's a given in any successful organization, whether it be trucking, sales, customer service, no matter what. But for drivers, it's real easy and real simple. And you drove, I drove, that number one, drivers are looking for competitive pay. They're not looking for the highest pay. They're just looking for competitive. They're looking for competitive home time. They're looking for competitive equipment. Doesn't have to be a brand new 2026 truck. It can be a 2024. You just have to make sure that it's competitive and well maintained, and competitive benefits. And then there's 3 cardinal rules regarding driver retention. Don't ever, ever mess with a driver's money. Don't ever, ever mess with a driver's home time. And most importantly, don't ever lie to a driver. You'll get away with each of those once, maybe twice. And the key to any really good organization is not how well they do on a daily basis, but how well they do when they screw up. Because there's going to be a screw up. There's going to be a payroll issue. Yeah. There's going to be a home time issue. How does the company deal with it? You got a payroll issue and we missed a trip that we should have paid on. Get that driver a T-check or a com check. Get those funds directly to the driver as quickly as possible. Because unfortunately, they're out there busting their butts and they have no way of making any additional money. There is no part-time job for most, especially over-the-road drivers. Lying to a driver, you'll get one shot. The second time, he's probably going to be out the door. So it's easy. And if you do all those things and you utilize predictive hiring as the essence of your hiring process, not just for drivers, but for each of the positions that you have available through the assessments, you've got a world-class carrier in less than 6 months.
All right, so let's jump to a new topic. And I totally agree, right? I mean, having dispatched thousands of drivers and watching it play out over my teams of, dozens of driver managers, absolutely. Most people in the world take those things for granted with their jobs, right?
Sure.
That you're going to get home, that you're going to get paid,
Yeah.
and that people aren't going to lie to you.
Well, that's the moral contract that employers have with employees.
Yeah, anybody, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't
your
matter friends, your spouse, your
Yeah.
your relatives, your employer, right? Don't interfere with my sleep and my home time and the time with my family. Make sure if you owe me money that I get paid it, especially if I've already done the work. And don't lie to me. Respect me as, equal in this and not like somebody who's not.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, cool. And so what's coming up for you guys? Like what's the future hold for Star Logic and Star Behaviors?
Well, we're working on an additional project called Second Chance. And we're collaborating with a consultant that has inroads with a large number of mid-size and large carrier CEOs. If we talk about the driver shortage, okay, and we'll just say that there is one for the fun of it, okay. When this freight recession turns around, and it will, we're not going to be stuck in this forever. It will eventually turn around. Carriers are going to be scrambling for drivers. And they're all going to be scrambling for the same drivers. Yet we have approximately 160,000 drivers that no one's talking to. Wow. What if there was a way, a consistent and reliable way to identify top performing drivers, but unfortunately they screwed up and were on the clearinghouse. They had tested positive, but streamlining the program where only for THC and marijuana is the qualifier for this program. And that they have to have a spotless safety record other than that clearinghouse issue. So no tickets in the last 3 years, no accidents in the last 3 years, no out of service violations on their PSP report in the last 3 years, nothing. They have to have been choir boys and choir girls in their background over the last 3 years. And what if those drivers were provided an opportunity through world-class carriers? That whole process becomes timely in doing, making sure the driver completes the assessment, extensive interviews with the driver to make sure that their clearinghouse issue was a once in a lifetime and will never happen again, making sure that it was a come to Jesus moment. I recall speaking with a driver, and we have this program over at BM Transport in regards to second chance drivers. And I had a driver that had tested positive a year ago for marijuana. And so he was eligible for the program. His safety record was pretty good. And he lived in Las Vegas. And what had happened was his buddies from back east had flown out to visit him, and they had picked up some pot, and he smoked pot with his buddies. Dumb. Just straight out dumb. So I asked the driver, okay.
And well, of course, what happens next when you do that, right?
And it always happens. A week later, he gets random.
Right.
Well, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. You're coming up on that stoplight. It's red. You're looking around. Nobody's around. You pull out, cross the intersection with the red stoplight. And guess what? There's a police officer sitting right there. Thank you.
Yeah.
That always happens. So he tested positive. And so I asked him, I said, okay. And he shared with me that for him, this had been a come to Jesus moment. And so I asked him a very basic question. I said, okay, your buddies call you up this week. Next week, they're coming out to Vegas. They want to hook up and get together with you again. What do you tell them? And the driver's response was, you know what? I'd probably hook up with them and have a drink with them. And these are the individuals that just screwed up his entire career. So in my wisdom, I just turned around and said, you know what? I don't think that BM Transport is going to be the right company for you. Simply because he was still hanging around the wrong people. And you can't hang around the wrong people.
No, not when you've already
No.
lost something significant and are barely hanging on by a thread to maybe get it back.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not just the qualifications. It's not just the assessment. It's extensive. So what we're looking at is developing a full second chance program and being able to provide to select carriers that are interested in expanding their recruiting efforts, providing them a ready to hire candidate, not just a ready to process candidate, but a ready to hire, so that all the work is done, all the background checks, all the verifications of employment, the clearinghouse reports, everything. So all that has to be then done is for that carrier to have their final interview with the candidate and schedule him for orientation. So we're looking at that because those carriers that are willing to embrace second chance, whether they do it themselves or whether they utilize this new project services, is that they're going to be the ones that aren't going to have the issues regarding filling trucks. And not only that, when you do have the right second chance drivers, and we have 5 of them that we hired since May 5th over at BMT. And in fact, in the month of July, 2 of those second chance drivers were in the top 5 in regards to production for miles driven for the month of July. And these were brand new drivers coming on with the company, learning the system. You have very appreciative drivers that have been given a second chance. And when you have appreciative drivers, you have very loyal drivers. Thus, your driver retention improves dramatically also. So
yeah. And if you got the right people with the right aptitude and the right mindset towards the job, they're usually safe drivers, thorough drivers. They don't damage freight. They don't hit stuff. They don't cut corners, all kinds of other things that diminish your bottom line.
Exactly. Like I said, all points of profitability point back to the initial point of hire.
Yeah, for sure.
It's that easy and simple.
So going to the driver shortage, you know, I mean, let me throw a thought of mine at you. Like if we were to go out in the industry right now, and if we subtracted out the drivers who, let's say they wouldn't get 3 or stars or more on your assessment, they're probably not well suited to it. Does that mean that they can't have, go out and drive a truck today and get through the day and,
Yeah.
No, that doesn't, right?
No, they can still drive a truck. It's just that the carrier may not want to hire those individuals because there's a greater likelihood that there's either going to be a safety related issue, a customer service related issue, a teamwork issue, and all of those affect retention.
Yeah, or are they just dissatisfaction with trucking in general
with the
because it's
job.
not well
Exactly.
suited, just
Not
like
well
you
suited.
with your operations role, right? Like,
Sure.
you just your likelihood you're going to disappear. But if we scraped out, we took out all the people who, if we actually lived by our what the bar is to be a truck driver in this country, and we rooted out non-English language proficient drivers, if we strip back cabotage back to where it's actually, within the boundaries of what the law intended, not what it gets enforced. If we took away, if we, dealt with some of our non-domiciled and other immigrant status stuff, and we went back, if we went to a level playing field, if we made all the 1099 drivers that should be W-2 drivers actually get classified properly and all the other stuff. In my mind, I look around and go, and if, we actually took unsafe drivers and things like that off the road and we had regulatory enforcement on some of this stuff, we probably do have a driver shortage in some ways, right? There's probably, I mean, and I'm saying if we don't do anything about compensation or this job structure the way it is, um, anything to entice people like me who could very well be a truck driver, but I have no intention of going back behind the seat of a wheel anytime soon. And I know a bunch of other people with CDLs too who kind of fall into that category of, yeah, it's not enticing enough to go given the current conditions. Um, uh, if because if you don't change the pay or the conditions or any of that stuff, there's just a certain amount of people with CDLs who are sitting on the sidelines. I forget what the number is, but it's, it's significant, right? And then you have the ones like you're talking about who are kind of in this gray periphery area, the people who are in the SAP program but can't get jobs, the other things, right? So in some ways, there's kind of a driver shortage, but there's kind of not. And I mean, I think that's one of the challenging things that we struggle with thinking about this whole concept of, is there a shortage? Is there not a shortage? What is the shortage really about?
The light bulb turned on just as you were speaking. If we correct, I always look at this as that what we've been trying to do for the last 20 years is fix a leaky hose or fix a problem with dirty water coming out my hose, contaminating my crops, contaminating my garden, okay, and my flowers, by fixing the leaks in the hose. If I just get more water, my plants will do better.
Yeah.
But the problem is that we've had contaminated water. It's not the hose. The process is fine. The problem is the people coming into the industry. So if we correct and get the right people in as truck drivers, what ends up then happening? Yes, there's going to be a shortage. Absolutely. Absolutely. But what it will also do is, number one, this freight recession has been caused partially by a reduction in freight. But we have more trucking companies now than we had pre-COVID. And we've been in a freight recession for 3 years. We have too many trucking companies chasing too little freight.
Yeah.
If we have carriers that embrace this, the only drivers that are going to be available for companies that don't embrace predictive hiring are going to be those drivers that are not well suited to be truck drivers in the first place. So they're left to survive based on those drivers that would score a 1 or a 2 star.
But that's kind of the way the system, air quotes, the system, if you look at some of the bigger players and the bigger voices around trucking, that kind of what they want anyway, isn't it? Right? I want the most desperate, least suited, the ones who will work for the least pay, because that's part of the profitability model of
Really?
ABC carrier.
Ask Heartland. 8 months in a row, or eight quarters in a row, 2 years of not being profitable. Their legacy company is profitable. Millis Transport has now become profitable. Smith and CFI, huge driver turnover. That's where they're bleeding. So if we believe that concept, oh, we want high driver turnover so that we can keep driver pay low. We don't want high. No, it doesn't work.
Well, how do you explain that we keep recycling the same ideas then? Because at some point, doesn't somebody look around and go, okay, and don't get me wrong, like these companies fluctuate, right? Not every month or quarter is the worst quarter ever. Sometimes they do actually have better numbers,
Sure.
but long-term trend, it doesn't, for most of these companies, it doesn't look like a successful story, right? I mean, they've had high turnover for years / decades in some instances. So what gives? I mean, if my truck's only got 5 miles per gallon over the course of the last 20 years with all the technology changes, you could bet my butt would be down in the maintenance area talking to my VP of maintenance going, what the hell are we doing wrong here? Because everybody else is getting, or there's companies out there like MVT or some of these other ones who are getting 7, 8, 9 miles per gallon, and it's costing me a fortune. Why don't we see that happening in the area of hiring and retention?
It's a good question. It's a really, really good question. Okay. Status quo, stuck in status quo city. Okay. Yeah, the industry stuck, what's that old saying? Yeah, my Congress is crooked, but my congressman is wonderful. It's the same thing. Yeah, the industry sucks, but our company is doing well. Okay. There is a wide variety of reasons. Okay. And we could spend several shows just on that.
That's why it's a series, right?
But part of it is, you have privately held companies and you have publicly traded companies. And there's two different mindsets. Publicly traded companies, profitability is second. Shareholder value is most important. Okay. You've had a number of publicly traded companies that have been bleeding. Okay. Warner Enterprises is another one. They announced for their first quarter, at the end of their first quarter, that they were not funding the 401k for all of their employees, not just for drivers, for all their employees. Why? Well, they had that impending nuclear verdict hanging over their head, but they also had high driver turnover. They had high expenses. And there's only so many things that a company can cut and control. They can't control an economy. No carrier can. They can't control fuel prices. They can control efficiency and maximizing efficiency for their trucks. But they really can't control the price at the pump. Okay. Only two things they can control are insurance costs and turnover. That's it. Cost of recruiting. Everything else. So once you improve with predictive hiring, you're also doing predictive safety, because drivers that have those qualities, core values, and behaviors of top performers, they've proven to be safer drivers. Less negative DOT inspections, better safety score, so forth. So what do you then do? Now you're able to negotiate a better insurance rate with your carrier, because we've incorporated and we have a line in the sand. From January 1st of 2025, we've put in predictive hiring, and the last 12 months, here's what we've shown, so that the next time you come up for renewal, and in fact, we'll be doing this with BMT coming up for the first of the year in negotiating new insurance rates and showing this is what we've done, because underwriters so much like data. They thrive on data. So in doing that, now we're able to address that. We lower insurance costs. We've lowered our cost per hire, lowered our advertising costs, because we don't have to advertise as much, because we're not churning drivers, as you had mentioned, simply a churn issue. We're not having to hire as many drivers, so we can be much more effective and lower our total recruiting expenses. We've now become much more profitable which now gives us the ability to increase driver wages and get a better quality of candidate, a better quality driver. So for us, who cares? A carrier, why is this huge talk about, well, the industry? When was the last time that the industry paid any trucking companies bills? Never. When was the last time?
Not much.
When was the last time that the ATA, the American Trucking Association, ever paid a trucking company's bills? Never. So why are we so concerned about what the industry? All that CEOs, CFOs, presidents of companies, owners of companies, directors of recruiting, VPs of driver recruiting, all they have to do is be concerned about what's happening at their company.
Yeah, and be successful and let the success speak for itself.
Exactly.
Well, you made me think of it, in there. I was thinking about, I forget which one of our founding fathers said it, but there was a line early on in the history of our country where it was like, well, what kind of country are we going to have? Or like, what did you guys create down there in Philadelphia during the Constitutional Convention and there? And, it was something along the lines of, a republic for as long as you can keep it. Right. And it's kind of the same way. It made me think of that thinking about drivers, right? Because with what you're working on, we're getting you the thing that you said was the problem, right? You needed drivers and you needed quality drivers who, if we treated them well, would stay and slow down that money leak of the revolving door that comes with it, whether it's spending the money on advertising and marketing and then recruiting and sign-on bonuses, all the other things. Like, let's invest in hiring the right people, getting them in the door. And now the question is, how long can you keep them, right? Are you doing the right things after the fact as a carrier to keep them? And that's kind of where you're working through it with folks.
And when you're more profitable, then you can offer those extraneous programs to entice,
Yeah, and to keep the leak from springing back open again,
exactly.
Right?
I mean, Apple is the perfect example. Steve Jobs, his wonderful line of, we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people to tell us what to do. And it's the same thing. I remember back in 2010, I was fired by a trucking company because I complained about an air leak and an oil leak on the truck. And I was fired at 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 4:17 that afternoon, the lawsuit hit their fax machine. And I'm one of the best attorneys in the industry, Paul Taylor with Truckers Justice Center, as my attorney. And I'd known Paul for a number of years, and he says, TJ, he says, if we're going to be successful in this, and he planned that we were, he says, I will never tell you how to back up a truck. Please don't tell me how to litigate a case.
Right.
It's fine. So the same thing, once we hire quality candidates for each of the positions that are available, hire the best quality qualified candidate, not just someone that qualifies. Guess what? Everything starts to bloom. Everything starts to blossom. And all of a sudden, you start picking up clients. You start having shippers and receivers say, wow, your drivers are really, really good when they come to the dock. I enjoy working with you folks. And in fact, in doing that, we're now going to give you more free. So
it's funny. Oh, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it's funny, right? And, having been on the ops floor and in these bigger fleets, working inside and operations and stuff. Like, it's funny. The thing that makes me chuckle about all this, and I think you'll appreciate it too, given your life story and background with this industry, which is just that, like, how many times are truckers standing around going like, this isn't that hard, people. Like, hire people who are good at the job, pay them well, and like half of your problems disappear. And also, as a trucker, right? Because yes, there is some mode of independence to it, right? Like I mean, unless you're a team driver, like the inside of your cab and there's there's part of it that you're like not really part of a team, you don't feel like, but the reality is you are, right? Whether that's a team with operations, a team with safety, a team with maintenance, right? HR, benefits, all that stuff. It's a part of a team. And also, the other part of the team is all these other drivers that are dropping trailers that I'm going to have to go pick up, that are relaying loads to me, all kinds of things. And guess what? No driver wants. They don't want the 1 and 2 star guy who doesn't want to be there, who isn't invested in it. They don't want to be the guy who gets the next trailer, or they're waiting for a relay and that guy hasn't updated his ETA. And now I'm sitting here for 8 extra hours because that guy just decided he was going to take a nap, and because he doesn't care anymore about the job and he's going to quit anyway. All that stuff that impacts me as my 3, 4, 5 star driver.
Exactly. And that's why this process is so critical, because you want like-minded drivers that are focused on safety, on customer service, on teamwork, so that when I, as a driver, go to pick up a preloaded trailer, I don't have to worry about the huge likelihood of having a bad tire, or a turn signal that's not working, or a mud flap that's missing, or out of reefer fuel, because my fellow drivers that are now on the fleet with me, we all possess those same qualities, core values, and behaviors, so that we know our DNA prevents us from dropping a trailer with those type issues, or if we are dropping that trailer, making sure that we notify maintenance or whoever needs, so that they can take care of it prior to that trailer being ready for service.
Yeah.
So that we talk about diversity. Guess what? I don't want my driver fleet to be diverse in regards to qualities, core values, and behaviors. They can look like anything out. They can have purple spots. They can have green ears. It doesn't matter. But if there's commonality in their qualities, core values, and behaviors, that's the key that's critical in regards to success with a driver fleet.
Yeah, for sure. And tying that into, driver appreciation. That's what a lot of drivers would appreciate. Show, that the person that they're standing next to or picking up a trailer from has the same values.
Exactly.
And you know what? Wouldn't feel comfortable dropping that trailer with a missing mud flap, knowing that that's going to screw up the next guy's day.
Correct.
So
because they wouldn't want it to happen to themselves. Yeah.
Right. And they wouldn't do it. And they want to feel like, what? I do it every time because it's the right thing to do. And it really hurts inside when you know that some of the people next to you don't, and that's all over in the world, not just trucking, but,
definition of character, doing what's right, even when no one's watching.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's roll that into, kind of wrapping this up. It's Driver Appreciation Week starting tomorrow, right? And I know I was a little bit snarky in my last episode about don't get me wrong. There are companies who absolutely deserve to be applauded for the driver appreciation that they show, not just during this week, but all year round. So, I don't want my snarkiness to be misconstrued. But I'm a trucker, so I'm sarcastic. So, in your years of driving, in your years in this business, I wanted to ask you, to have a little fun, like, when did you feel most appreciated as a part of the trucking industry? Like, where, what was the job? What did they do? Like, what made you feel appreciated?
Probably with Martin Transport.
Wisconsin, the reefer guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blue Martin.
Yeah. Bluebird, right?
Yeah.
I drove for them for 5.5 years. And the only reason why I left them was to go work in Iraq. And I was very much, one of the things that I was able to do is develop relationships, not just with my driver manager, but with nighttime operations also. And so that in doing so, if they had a problem, operations would send me a message and say, hey, we see that you're ahead of schedule. Can you help us out with that? And so those were the day-to-day appreciative stuff when I'd walk into the terminal. And there were times, in fact, I still recall that I actually, quote unquote, fired my driver managers twice because they weren't proactive. They were reactive in regards to dispatching me. And so it's just those little things of when you walk into a terminal or when a driver manager turns around and sends you a message and says, hey, thank you. Driver appreciation to me is a 365-day event. And it should be. And drivers don't need every day saying we appreciate you. They don't need, all the monies in the world. All they simply need is recognition on a rather regular basis, once a month, once every couple of weeks, and just say, hey, you did a really good job. Thank you for taking the time out and doing that. I still remember some of the things that just didn't make sense. I drove for US Express, and this was when US Express was a really, really good company back in the day, back in the mid 90s, and we were the cream of the crop. And the suits, when I say the suits, the people in operations or administrative and so forth, driver support, they were thinking like driver support, or they were thinking like suits, not like drivers. Mm-hmm. And they actually provided us a tin can of nuts as a driver appreciation gift. Okay, put that in your truck. And unfortunately, you have a heartbreaking situation. All of a sudden, that can of nuts goes spilling all over them. So
right off the doghouse, down the passenger side. There you go.
So we have to sometimes, realize. I know that a lot of companies over the next week or two will be having cookouts, and barbecues and grilling for so forth. And that's wonderful. Except the bulk of your drivers are out on the road. They're making money. It's a great event for operations and for safety and so forth. But is it really for the driver? I had a really good client out of Illinois when we were doing third-party recruiting. And based upon the driver's longevity, he provided them with a $500 or $1,000 check. He provided them with either a high-quality Bluetooth headset or a trucking GPS unit for each of his drivers. His driver turnover without predictive hiring, just you were talking about finding those right carriers, his driver turnover is about 18%. And he's a 150 truck company. You know what? He's doing it right. He doesn't need to fix it. He's doing it.
Yeah, and it's just like, with your spouse or whatever, people close to you, like at Christmas, it's not always about the money, and it's not about the thought that counts actually is true, right? Like, and that's how it can be every day or, on a more regular basis. And it's awesome to celebrate it weekly and do something where you push yourself to go above and beyond the norm but, seek out everybody in your organization and figure out a way to make them feel truly appreciated. Because it means something, man. Being, you and I both been on the road, like it can be a lonely feel, like, you get figuratively spit in the face on a lot of times during the day as a truck driver. Like it just doesn't feel good. And you question your sanity, your life choices, a lot of things throughout the day and throughout the week and throughout the years. These are the sorts of things that help they go in that other column that says, why do I even do this? And you're, you know what? Because it matters, and people and somebody besides me recognizes that my hard work, that doing pre-trips on my equipment matters, that dropping off clean, empty trailers matters, and all those little things matter.
We very much do. Even for family members, to send their driver a text message and say, hey, just want to let you know we're thinking of you today. When that happened for me, when my wife would send me a message like that, or a gal that I was dating would send me and say, hey, I know you're not sure what kind of day you're having. Hope you're having a great day. Boy, that got an extra 100 miles out of me.
Yeah, man.
So it's the little things that count. Absolutely. like I said, for me personally, my opinion is that driver appreciation is 365 days. You know, you'll have companies that will, yeah, well, we tried that driver retention thing once and it didn't work. Yeah, it's okay. And you just shake your head and you walk away. So
All right, last question for you. In all your years, like what's your fondest memory? What stands out in your mind off the top of your head? Favorite trucking memory?
That's easy. The camaraderie I was able to share while working in Iraq. We had drivers and we were all focused on the same thing, and that was staying alive and providing the mission for the military. So the camaraderie that was built there, we had a team, especially my last tour in Iraq as a driver in southern Iraq, down at Talil Air Base. And we had a team of drivers and we went to dinner. We virtually did everything together. We did breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. We did everything together, and it was camaraderie beyond. It was really what trucking, when you look back on, Convoy and Smokey and the Bandit and those kind of days, it was that type of camaraderie amongst, there was 12 of us in the group, in that team. And we had such strong friendships that, 20 years later, I still maintain those friendships.
That's cool.
The experience that I had that, I was very, very blessed to be able to serve my country and provide support for the troops. Part of my driving there was involved with the ice mission. So we were providing bagged ice to the troops, and the look on those troops when our trucks would pull in on convoy with them, and they knew they had ice. And there were times that there was one instance where the camp didn't have ice for about a week. And we showed up at 2:00 in the morning because our mission had been delayed. And the colonel who was there, he turned around and broke open the freezers and opened up the mess tent and served us steaks because they were so grateful for us to be there. So, the camaraderie with my fellow drivers, and then the camaraderie with not just the U.S. troops, but all the coalition troops that we worked with. A highlight in my lifetime. I think back, my dad passed away a number of years ago, and one of the comments was that my dad had a full life. And that's the one thing that I would say, that I've had a full life, and whether it be in Iraq, working the US, and now living down in Mexico, it's been a full life.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that. Great memory. Well, all right, brother. It's been awesome talking to you. I'm glad we got to spend this time together, and look forward to bringing you back and, exploring some of these other angles of trucking, because I know you're passionate about it, and you live and breathe trucking, and just like me. So really, really grateful for your time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We're talking trucking life, uncut. The wild stuff, the weird stuff, the mistakes, the memories, and the miles in between. From first jobs to last hauls, the laughs that kept us going, and the lessons that left a mark.
Well, drivers, that's going to do it for this week's run. We've covered some miles, went down in the gully, and asked some uncomfortable questions. That was TJ Graff from Star Behaviors, and I appreciate him taking the time to share his perspective on behavioral assessments and the driver shortage. He's working to improve outcomes within the system as it exists, and also break down some barriers, and that matters too. And also, he's a great person that I've really enjoyed our off-air conversations as well. Conversations about life, cars, God, and that great view he's got down in Mexico. Quick shout outs before we wrap things up. Big Cal over at Truckin' with Coffee and Cal, who helped out that driver over at the Walmart DC this week. That's the 10,000 hour reality Gary Buchs was talking about. And it's also the brotherhood of truckers and Christians that still mean something out there. Chris Barber, still fighting the Crown's attempt to destroy Big Red. Check out cbtruckingltd.ca if you want to help out. Mike Ritzema at Superior Trucking Payroll, truckingpayroll.com. His numbers don't lie. Wages down 6%, cost up 10%. Check out his podcast too. We've got Barry Trahan's 3rd annual Louisiana Truck Show coming up in October in Rain, Louisiana, as well as Lee Owens' American Truckers Jubilee over in Searcy, Arkansas. Find all the truck show information at thetruckshowlist.com. I'll be down at Barry's show this year. Who's bringing some jambalaya? And also Deb Labrie over at awomentrucker.com. And she was also on Road Dog this week on the Women in Trucking show on Sirius XM. So go and check that out. And find Gary Buchs on LinkedIn or on his Facebook group, Truck Business Network. Now, while tunneling around underground, trying to make some sense of all this driver shortage narrative, I ran across another tunneler, Will Cook. Will's been tunneling under this industry for years. And next week on episode 30, we'll hear what he's found down there. Spoiler, it's not a driver shortage. In the meantime, check out Will's page on Facebook, A Driver's Perspective. Also, he's got several books up on Amazon.com talking about his various perspectives and things he's researched about the trucking industry, the driver shortage, and a lot of the big players. And speaking of tunnelers, it reminds me of the TV show Peaky Blinders. You know, Tommy Shelby and his crew in the show were World War I tunnelers, clay kickers, they called them. They dug beneath enemy trenches to plant explosives, one of the most dangerous jobs in the war. And they were from Birmingham, England. That place that keeps calling me back, where I somehow keep finding this feeling of home there. It's a place with a lot of industrial history, the remnants of better times, and also a place of rebirth as well. Many layers to the city of Birmingham. If you want to be a part of the conversation, reach out, inbox at channel19experience.com or hit the Be a Guest button on the website. If you're not driving, please remember, like, follow, subscribe, share the podcast with somebody who needs to hear this. Villains, keep asking those uncomfortable questions. Thank you for putting me in the jump seat with you this week. We've got work to do.
This has been the Channel 19 Experience. If it's about trucking, we're talking about it. All uncut. The wild stuff, the weird stuff, the mistakes, the memories. But we talk about the world of trucking today, too. Everything from legislation to lane changes in the industry. We got it covered. Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back at the ranch soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on social media at Channel 19 Experience and the website at www.channel19experience.com. That's channel and the numbers 19. See you down the road.